In today's Procreate class, we are going to practice painting a pumpkin. It's a little bit of a simple design, but I think that it will be very good practice for us to be working with the brushes, working with the layers, and stay till the end of the class. We are going to be doing some really fun things with some tools in Procreate, and I think that you'll enjoy that. So let's go ahead and jump down to the iPad and get started. So here's the file that you can download at Shelly Parker ART. I will put a link to that file here in the description of this video. So when you get the file onto your Procreate app, when you click the two boxes at the top, the layers screen, you can see the sketch and the reference photo. If you don't know how to get the reference photo onto your canvas like I have it here, be sure that you watch the video about how to do that. I'll also put that video link in the description here. It's really handy to be able to have your reference picture right here to refer to. You will see an extra layer on mine. I've made myself a little note about some brushes that I've used, so you won't have that on your file. The very first thing that I want to do is add a layer that will be the layer that we begin to paint on. So I'm going to click the little plus button, and that adds a new layer. So we see the sketch layer has the padlock on, the reference layer has the padlock on. It's nice to have that on so that we don't accidentally get on the wrong layer. Just to demonstrate that, I can do that with this layer that I have a couple of notes for myself in. What I want to do is just swipe to the left and then tap the lock button. When I do that, it puts the padlock there. If you ever want to unlock any of your layers, it's the same process. We just swipe to the left and tap unlock. So I'll go ahead and leave that one locked. I can actually also, for mine, move it down here out of the way. So moving layers is something that you'll want to be able to do. I don't know that we'll do a bunch of it in this class, but just since I did it here, I'll go ahead and show you. I'm just going to tap and hold. You can kind of see the pencil pick it up and drag it down to the bottom. So now I want to be sure that I get back to my layer that we made for the painting, and then I'm ready to get started. For most of this painting, I'm going to use the Shelly Parker ART acrylic round and the natural detail brush. Those are both also available for you for free at the website. So if I click the brush, you can see here that I do have it selected, and we can just get started painting. Generally, the way that I begin painting in Procreate is the exact same way that I would begin if I was sitting down at my easel with my acrylic paints. And I like to paint that way in Procreate because often what I'm doing is preparing for a painting, making my plan. So I'm going to just tap and hold on the screen and pick out a darker color that we can start to build some of the shape of our pumpkin. Remember, you can 2 fingers on the screen and pinch out to zoom in this reference window too. So I'll pick a color that's one of those darker colors. Usually when I do any color picking, I will go ahead and right away look at that color in my color circle. So when I click the color circle, I get a pop-up. I have mine set on classic. That's what I use most. So if you don't have classic selected here, your view will look different. So for instance, if you had disc selected, it would look like that. If you make sure that you're in the classic version, then you'll see what I'm seeing. Sometimes it's nice to adjust that color that picks from your reference picture a little bit. So this is your opportunity to adjust that if you'd like to adjust it a little bit. So I'm still on my brush, double check my layer. I'm on the layer that I want to paint on, and let's jump in. I was on the layer. Procreate is funny like that. Sometimes you do all the double checks and then you go to start and it's still it's somehow in the tech gremlin thing that happens sometimes, it gets on the wrong layer again. And that's what I was speaking about before. That's one of those great reasons to go ahead and have the layers that you want to make sure you don't get on locked. So I'm just going to very loosely begin to lay in some of the shadows. Remember, both of these brushes that are available on the website have that color jitter built in. So if you lift your pencil and put the pencil back down again, you see a little bit of a color variation. That's purposefully built into these brushes. And you can sure take more time if you're watching this video and you need a little bit more time. Feel free to just hit pause and finish that section before you restart. In a lot of the videos that I do on my channel, I recommend to the students that they watch the whole video through all the way first, and then come back in and actually sit down to follow along and paint. I think that the nice thing about doing that, whether it's a Procreate tutorial or an actual acrylic painting tutorial, is you get more of a sense of the direction that I'm going, and then it makes more sense when you sit down to actually paint. So I'm going to come in and color pick a more true orange. So just trying to, the color picker, I don't know if you can see by my finger, but there's just a little kind of crosshairs where it's choosing the color from. I'm going to pick the color circle up here and check where that is. It looks pretty good. Let's try that. So this is very loose. It will look like a mess as you get started. Embrace the mess. It's okay for it to be a mess. If you don't like the color when you first set the pen down because of that color jitter, just pick up the brush and set it back down again. See, like there, just kind of keep cycling through the colors until I get it more the color that I want. And being just very loose. It's just like when we began to paint for our acrylic paintings. We're just kind of, it's almost like building a little bit of a road map. Where are some of the lighter colors? Where are the shadows? I think I will pick a little bit of a lighter color. Maybe starting to lean towards some of that yellower color. And again, I opened my color picker and looked at where that is. I can just drag the color if I want to adjust it a little bit. I'm going to reduce the size of my brush. You could see there as I was painting, it really wants to go bleed out. So I can just adjust the size, and that will help. Adjust the size a little bit more. I just wanted to make sure that I was on the right brush. Remember the brush sensitivity. Remember that your pressure on the brush matters. So generally start out with pretty light pressure and then kind of feel how that is working on the piece that I'm working on, and then adjust the pressure from there. So that is just a very quick block in. And this is exactly what we're looking for. Even though it looks like a mess, this is exactly what we hope for at this stage. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to the smudge tool. I want to use the same brush, so when I switch to the smudge tool, I'm going to just tap and hold. It'll say that little pop-up that says you're smudging with the current brush. And I'm going to just come in and soften a little bit. Just pulling it together just a little bit. As you start to soften, if you feel like it's softening too much, you're losing too much of the detail, then use this bottom opacity slider to reduce the power of that smudge. So you can see in some places it's actually smudging that white of the background. That's okay, just let it happen. That's kind of what I'm going for here. I really am looking at trying to fill in some of those white areas that are left. You might not have as many white areas on yours if you're taking a little bit more time to block yours in than I did. So again, very light pressure still. And as I'll always mention with the brushes will behave differently based upon how your pen orientation is. So if you have it straight up and down, it will behave differently than if you have it more horizontal and on its side. So always feel free to take a moment. I'm going to two-finger tap to undo what I just did. Always feel free whenever you start a piece, particularly if you're using a brush that you're not familiar with yet, do a little bit of practice on the side. So work with the brush a little bit, see what it does off to the side, get a feel for it, and then you can always two-finger tap to undo to go back to what you were doing. So I just clicked back on the smudge brush again. So I'm going to go ahead and go forward from here. Like I said, as you're doing yours, take your time, build in a couple of different values of oranges and yellows here. Once you get it where you feel pretty good about it, we're going to duplicate this layer and really build up some of the richness. This is a very quick way to get some of that vibrancy that we want with our painting. So to do that, I'm going to click the layers. I'm going to right slide on the layer that is the layer that we've been painting on. So right slide and duplicate. You can see right away what happens on the screen, how much more impact what we just painted has. So I'll show you by turning off that layer. That's the original layer. Here's how it looks with a second layer added. Sometimes I add even a third layer. So let's see what that looks like. If I slide it to the left, just that one layer and hit duplicate, now you can see I've got even more. It just adds all those layers together, and we pretty quickly can get that vibrancy of color that we want. I like how that looks, so I'm going to go ahead and merge those three layers together so that they're all on one layer. The reason that I want to do that is if I just left them like this and then I went back, let's say I want to smudge some more. If I try to smudge, I'm only going to be smudging that one top layer. I really want everything that I'm doing to affect all of those layers. So on the layers, I'm going to put my first finger on the top layer, my thumb on the bottom layer of these layers that I want to group together, and I'm just going to pinch them together. Now they're all on one layer, and now everything that I do is going to affect all of that color. So we can go back to the smudge again and begin to just refine it a little bit. I'm going to increase the opacity a little bit and increase the size a little bit, just so it is having a little bit more of an impact. So particularly on smudge, as you're using smudge, the opacity really makes a big difference. If your smudge is like out of control, reduce the opacity. If you don't feel like your smudge is doing enough, then increase the opacity. Remember, where we set the brush down also matters in the smudge tool. So if I set my brush down on a lighter area, that's the color that it's going to begin to smudge around. So I'm trying to do away with a little bit of the white that's left from my block in. So I want to make sure that when I put my brush down to smudge, that I'm not on that white area. That'll just bring more of that color in that I'm trying to do away with. All right, so I think that now what I'd like to do is, again, come back in and add just a little bit more of that true orange. So we'll go back to the color picker, just long finger hold on the reference photo, and move it around until you get close to the color that you think that you want to use. Now we can go back to the color circle and we can take a look at what that color is. This line is the history of the colors that we've been using. I might just go ahead and pick one of those just to get that more of a true orange. And I think that what I'd like to do here, because of the way, you can kind of see as I bring that in, it's affecting the layers that are underneath of it a little bit more than I would like it to. I'd like for this color to show more on top. So to do that, I'm going to add a layer on top of this painting layer. So with the layer selected that we're on, when we click plus, it automatically adds a layer above. And now I can come in and start to set in some of that color without it really affecting the other colors. It kind of stands on its own this way. I hope that made sense. That was a little bit harder to explain than I expected. Just never worry about creating too many layers. If you're in doubt, go ahead and create a layer. You can always merge them together later. But if something isn't working the way that you think it should, just add a layer. Now that I have that layer on top, I can merge them back together again. Now I want to smudge everything that I have. So the same process. 2-finger pinch those layers together. Now they're all on one layer. Making that other layer really just kind of helps us get that color in, and then we can work with it. So now let's go ahead and reset some of these section lines in the pumpkin. Sometimes, and for this piece, I've actually played with it a little bit already. And I know that I really like, I like the lines to be a little bit darker than even what they show in the reference. So we can also come back in and just do a color pick from our piece over here. And then I can make that color just a little bit darker by clicking the color circle and dragging that color down. So when I do that, now I know that these colors will go together because it's already a color, a variation of that color that's on my piece. Reduce my brush size a little bit and come back in and just start to add in some of this, some more of these lines. They're so characteristic of a pumpkin and really will make your piece really stand out and really have all of those little details that we want. You can see with just those couple of lines that I just put in, it's already reading more like that shape of a pumpkin that we're going for. And I don't want to necessarily do like a straight line like that. Let it be sketchy. Let it start and stop. It doesn't need to be a full line from top to bottom. So now I can go back to the smudge tool and I can just go over those a little bit just to settle them in a little. It looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and work a little bit more on the highlights that we want to have on our pumpkin. So I'm going to actually add another layer, and I'm going to change the blend mode of that layer to give us the results that we want here. So to do that, we're going to click the layers. Here we have the one layer that has all of our painting so far on it. So I'll click the plus to add a new layer. Here's the new layer on top. And then this little N is the blend mode. I want to change that to add. This is a blend mode that you kind of have to practice with a little bit. It automatically brightens whatever color you choose. So let me show you how that works. If I come back over to my pumpkin and I go ahead and try to pick from one of these lighter highlight sections, it's really those highlights that I want to build now. So I'm going to come in, just checking again that we're on this add layer, and I'm going to start to build in some of these highlights. I'm going to dial in the brush size. So I hope that you can really see that glow on that layer now that we're on that add. If you tried to do this very same thing, so same color on the layer that we were initially on, it can just have a hard time really building the glow. You can see how it's kind of just almost faded out, really. So being on that add layer really gives us some of that punch of highlight that's fun to work with. I'm going to add a little bit of it right here, just kind of loosely looking at the reference picture to see where some of those highlights are. Again, this is very pressure sensitive, so the more you push down, the more of the effect you'll get. I'm sorry if you can hear my vacuum upstairs. The robot vacuum had decided, just as I came down to work on this, that it was ready to vacuum. Add a little bit up here. We don't have to be specific. Every pumpkin is a little bit different. Every light source is a little bit different. We're just gonna have fun with it and get close. So now I can go ahead and go to the smudge tool and start to smudge some of that in. I think that what I will do is bring these two layers together now that I have some of that glow built in. So we'll do that same process of pinching them together. Now they're all on the same layer. And the thing that we want to check here, we want to make sure that now this mode is back to normal. So if you pinch and it still stays on A, just go ahead and click the A, change it back to the normal mode. So now that I have those layers together, now the things that I'm doing here, the smudging that I'm doing, will affect all of those colors together. And you can build on this. You can do it multiple times. If you start to smudge and you feel like you did away with too much of that glow that you were trying to build in, just put it back in. Just do another layer. Make it the add layer again. Add a little bit more of the highlight. Just repeat that whole process. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and work on some of the other areas. Let's put a little bit of dirt or surface below our pumpkin. So I want to go to the layers and I'm going to work on another layer just to be sure that I can edit that layer separate from the pumpkin. So I'm going to click add a layer and you can see that it brought the layer in right above that pumpkin layer. Because this is the ground, because this is what the pumpkin is going to be sitting on, I'm going to move this layer underneath. So that means that anything that is that gets up into this area where we've already painted will be behind the shapes that we already have. So let's go in and let's just pick a brown that we can start to paint with. And I think that it might be fun at this point to change to a more of a textured brush. So we'll change to a brush that is that comes standard in the Procreate app. When I open up my brush panel, I'm on my Shelly Parker ART panel that just has two brushes. So if you're not seeing all of your library, pinch in on that screen and you'll have the Procreate library and the classic library. So let's go ahead and go into the classic library. Let's pick the organic section and then the Rainforest brush. This is a brush that I use quite a bit. I really like it. I'm going to just double check my layers to make sure that I'm on the layer below the pumpkin layer. And let's play with this brush a little bit. I'm going to increase the opacity. I don't mind the size of that so far. Maybe a little bit bigger. I'm just using it very sketchy again, just like we did before, and you can vary the sizes so you could get some different looks to this texture that we're building. And you can also just spend some time with this too. Change your colors around, add in some variation. And then let's go ahead and go back to the brush. So we're still on the rainforest. If we want to smudge with that brush, we can just long hold and it will change the smudge tool to also be the Rainforest Brush. So we can play with that, see if we like it. If you feel like you have too much of a hard time managing it, go back to the Shelly Parker ART acrylic brush. So I just went to the very top of this screen, clicked recent, and that's the fastest way to get back to that brush. So now I can go ahead and smudge it a little bit. The other thing that I can do, and I love to do this too, kind of a little bit of a shortcut, we can apply a Gaussian blur to this to blur it out a little bit. To do that, we're going to go to this magic wand or adjustments tool and then tap on Gaussian blur. You can see that it pops up here with a blur at 0%. So if I drag my pencil, you can see that it starts to change the percentage up here. And I can just look at just hitting that sweet spot that I'm looking for. So it's really just about 1%. And then we can just, we can keep blurring it if we want to. Another great thing to do is to go ahead and duplicate the layer, much like we did on the pumpkin. So swipe left to duplicate. That darkens that whole section, but now I can adjust the opacity. So just adjusting the opacity on just the one layer. I'm going to make mine about 50%. So it just softens that one layer. Another great thing about the layers is we could move that layer to offset it just a little bit from where the original copy, the original duplication was. So if I come up to pick the arrow, that selects just that layer, and I can just move it a little bit. I can even resize it. So I hope that you can see how interesting that is. A little note here at this point. Remember always, as you're working in Procreate, to try to maintain enough of the layers that you would be able to use this painting on the widest range of projects that you might want to work with. So for instance, just in what we have here so far, if I go back to my layers, the stacked boxes, and turn off this ground area, now I have just the pumpkin, and I could use this maybe in a cornucopia or another fall piece. So keep that in mind. We don't want to merge this down so much that we have everything all on one layer, because that will reduce the ways that we can reuse this file going forward. I am going to go ahead and combine the two dirt layers that we were just working on. So I'm going to just pinch those together. And what you saw just happen is a common thing. And the reason that it happens is because of the layers that are selected. So I'm going to 2-finger tap to undo that. That will bring both of those layers back. The reason that it took me to a blank screen was because I had both of those layers turned off, both of them not visible. So before I merge them down, I want to be sure to turn them back on. Now when I merge, so 2-finger pinch those two layers, now it's still there. So I do that quite a bit. If you do it, don't panic, just 2-finger tap to undo. That'll take you back, turn the layers on, and you're all good to go. So now we're ready to work on the stem. I am going to make sure that I've got another layer above the pumpkin. So just add a layer. If your layer ends up being down lower in the list, it really doesn't matter too much at this point. We just really want to be able to edit this stem on its own. So I'm going to move mine to the top just because that makes a little bit more sense to me for this piece. Let's go ahead and add in some of the dark. I'm going to really go through this pretty quickly. It really is the same process as what we did with the pumpkin. So double checking that I'm on a layer just from my stem. And I'm just going to start to build in some of those areas where I see the darkest color. If you're fighting with this at all with the acrylic round brush, you could try it with the natural detail. Sometimes the natural detail brush is just a little bit nicer as far as sizing down to those finer details. But I'm just loosely looking for where some of those shadows are. Now I'm going to long finger hold on the reference picture and try to find that green color. So we can begin to bring it in. I think pumpkin stems are so interesting. They have so much texture. I'm going to see if I can get a little bit of a lighter color for the top of the stem up here. The brush was a little too big for that, so I just did the 2-finger tap to undo. I'd like to get a color that's just a little greener. So the way that I found that, let me undo, I don't know if it'll, no, it won't let me undo the picker. This color slider here, we can actually adjust the color and then, you know, slide over to a lighter color. Just sometimes in the reference pictures, it's just a little bit hard to, you know, to find that perfect color. Even when you're looking at it and you see it, it's just hard to get it to pick. So now that I have that lighter lime color, I'm going to bring a little bit of it in down here. And then let's get a little bit of the orange. I like the orange showing up. So I just did the color picker on the reference photo, and now I'm going to drag it just a little bit more of a true orange in this classic screen. And then I'll go back to my history. So the history is in the color circle, that top line, and I want to restate a little bit right at the top of this, just so that there's not quite so much white showing. You might not have as much white showing on yours when you're taking your time doing this a little bit more slowly. So now we can go ahead and go back to our smudge tool and just lightly bring this together a little bit. I don't want to completely blur it out. I just want to lightly affect it. If it's too strong, go ahead and turn the opacity down. You can also turn the size of the brush down. So now that what we can do at this point is we can duplicate the layers just like we did for the pumpkin itself. I'm looking at it, feeling like I really want a little bit more of that dark. You can see it, you know, side by side, how maybe adding in just a little bit more of the dark would be good. So again, I'll smudge that just a little bit. Now let's go ahead and do the duplicate and see how that affects the stem. So in the layers, the two squares stacked up here, the layer that's selected is the stem layer that we were just working on. I'm just going to swipe to the left and duplicate it. And you can see, just right away, it really improved the vibrancy of that little bit of painting that we just did. I think I'm going to go ahead and pinch those two together, do just a little bit of smudging to bring those colors together again. It looks pretty good. I really like this highlight that's on the side of the stem over here. I think that that adds a lot of dimension. Let's add it to ours. So you saw there that I color picked. It seemed like it was a little bit dark, so I'm going to just drag that circle up a little bit lighter. Go back to my pen. And just put a little line of that in. And again, smudge just a little bit to settle it in there. Okay, so take your time, have fun with that. There's a lot more that you can do, but I think that that gives you an idea of kind of how to begin to add the stem details. Let's take it a step further. Let's have more fun with it. This is completely optional if you're brand new and you don't want to do this. Please don't feel like it's something that's required. It certainly isn't. But I love some of the texture, some of this almost a dappling effect in the stem. So I'm going to add that to my piece. We have just the stem here. I'm going to right swipe and duplicate that one more time. Then I'm going to come to the adjustments and I'm going to pick noise. When I pick that, we have that same thing that we saw with the Gaussian blur before. It says noise 0%. I'm going to place my pencil down anywhere on the screen and slide it to the right. So you can see as I slide it, I hope that you can see it. Let me see if I can, there you can really see how it adds this speckled effect. What we get when we do that is a little bit of this blurring out. I'm not worried about that at all. That's perfectly okay. So I think I like that. You can play with that and see what you like. So now that I have the noise applied to that layer, remember it's just on this top layer. That's why we duplicated it. If we hate it, we could delete this layer altogether. With this noise layer still active, now I'm going to come in and do the Gaussian blur on it. So I'm going to tap the adjustments, the magic wand, and then tap Gaussian blur. Now I have the Gaussian blur at the top. Same thing, place my pencil down anywhere on the screen and slide it until I have it looking kind of like I want it to look. I want it to be a little soft. So I'm going to do 1%, about there. The next thing that we could do to edit this even further is to change the opacity of just that layer. So I can go back to the layers button, the two stacked boxes, tap the N, and I could reduce the opacity just to soften the effect that it has. So now I can come back And if I like this, if I have it the way that I want it, I can pull those two layers together by just doing that pinch that we've done multiple times. And now I can come in and clean up some of what kind of bled out of the area. So I'm going to click my eraser. I'm just going to check which brush I'm on. I'm on Syrup. Syrup is a brush that comes standard with Procreate, so you'll have it in your inking section. Mine says Syrup 1 because I've edited that brush just a little bit to add some streamline to it. But I can just come in and clean up the edges a little bit. You saw me there move the canvas around, so it's just 2 fingers down. I can zoom way in. 2 fingers down, I can twist it and turn it any direction that I like. Let's go ahead and add just a little bit of texture to the pumpkin. I think that, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. You can see a little bit of the texture there. We don't have to make ours quite as pronounced than that, but it's a fun little technique to work with too. So we'll check our layers. Let's go to the pumpkin layer and add a layer. So you can see that now we have another new layer on top of the pumpkin that we painted originally. I'm going to come in and again choose that lighter, one of the lighter yellow highlight areas. I feel like I got kind of a cream color there. That's not what I want. So I'll adjust it, make it quite light. There we go. That's more what I want. I just went back down to the history and picked a color that was more of a true yellow and then lightened it up here. So double checking the layer that we're on. Yes, we're on a new layer. Let's pick a texture that we can work with. Let's go to textures. This Dove Lake is an interesting texture. So again, this is a brush that is standard with Procreate. It's on every Procreate app that you download. And let's go ahead and the first few strokes are a little bit of a test. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, I like that, except I want it to be a little bit more random. I want it to be a little bit more spread out. So the way that we're going to do that is to adjust the brush. So clicking on the brush, if we click again on this Dove Lake brush, that brings up those brush settings that we talked about before. So if I tap it again, now I have the brush studio. This spacing, if I drag it out, I can make a more spaced out pattern that this brush will work in. So I can just click the check mark and that applies those settings that we just did. I'm going to come back and make this just a little bit lighter yet. Well, let's see what that does. Yeah. So you can play around a lot with different textures. It's really fun to spend a little bit of time just experimenting with brushes and seeing what brushes can do. We can also make this an add layer to get more of that glow. So you can see when I make that layer an add layer, you can see how it really amps up those lightened areas that we just did. If it's too much, we can do a couple of different things, and I like doing both. So with this add layer selected, oops, I undid it. Let me put it back to add layer. We can go ahead and Gaussian blur that. So again, in the adjustments, move to Gaussian blur. It pops up at the top of the screen, and I can just slide it until I like the look that I have. So around 3%. And then I can also adjust the opacity. So I can take the opacity down, say maybe 81%. And then the look that we have is much more natural. Like I mentioned, you can spend more time doing this. There's a lot more that can be done with this piece as far as really building up the oranges and really taking your time to get all of the areas just exactly the way that you want them. Let me see if I can get back to kind of a true orange and come in and show just how you could begin to make even more layers. So this is the add layer. You could at this point, if you wanted to, pinch those together. I'm going to leave mine for now. And I'm still on the, I want to go back. I want to not be on the Dove Lake anymore. I want to go back to the acrylic round and adjust the size. So since I have the add layer still on its own layer, now any changes that I make here aren't directly affecting that. So that's why, just be careful when you decide to do your merged layers. So there's a lot more that I would really do with this piece. I do want to show you just one more little thing that you can use at the end once you have everything really the way you want it. And like I said, there's a lot more that I would do, but I think that that gives you a pretty good overview of the steps to take to get your painting going. Before I jump into that last little tip I'm going to give you in this class, I do want to remind you that many times in Procreate, as we are like way zoomed in on a piece, it can have a much different look than it will on any final piece. So if we were going to be using this on a cornucopia or on another fall art piece, you can see if I zoom out, it gives me a much more realistic view of sort of the size that we would be using this. So last little trick. We can adjust the shape of our painting, and for mine, since I really did a kind of a quick version for this class, there are a lot of areas that could use a little reshaping. So the first thing I'm going to do is come in and turn off the sketch. So you could just see there when I tap this check mark in the sketch layer, that turns it off. And now I just have just the painting itself. And what I want to do is adjust some of the shapes of our pumpkin. So I'm going to go to the adjustments or the magic wand. I'm going to pick liquefy, and then down at the bottom, I'm going to choose push. I have mine set at about 15% for this. I might have to change it, but that's where it is at the moment. So when I come up here, I can push the shape around to build more of that, the bumps of the back of the pumpkin. You want to just sort of go carefully here, make little adjustments. You can see when I make this adjustment here, I've got this little notch. If I can't fix it in this liquefy, I can fix it later when we go back to the normal brush. But you can see how you can really round out areas and reshape without having to go to go back and erase and start all over again. So it's a nice little trick to use to, you know, to make our pumpkin a little bit rounder. This is a great tip for other paintings too that you'll do. It's a nice little tool to have at your disposal when you're working. I can use it to drag up some of these shapes to sort of close some of those holidays that are showing. Holidays are just those white areas that are left. We can also come in with our brush again and reshape some of these areas. Anytime you're working with a smudge tool, it's easy for it to kind of mess up those edges a little bit. I don't know if you could hear Higgins stretching behind me. So I hope that you'll enjoy working with this piece. If you do paint this, I hope that you will let me know what you thought about this class. I think very soon we're going to start to go ahead and transition into getting more start to finish pieces where I actually show you more the whole process rather than the overview. Like I said, this is really just an overview. If I was going to finish this piece, and I will be finishing it because it'll be a nice piece to have in my gallery, I would be coming in and adding a few more highlights around the stem. I'd amp up some of the highlights that are showing, that some of the glow that shows on the pumpkin. And I would also build in more of the shadows around the base, really giving it the round shape. I would also darken some of the areas in this dirt underneath to give it a little bit more interest. But I hope that you'll subscribe to the channel. We're going to have lots more videos. We're going to have a lot more Procreate files that you'll be able to work with. So I think that you'll enjoy the classes that are coming up. I'll see you at the next one.